Okay, with the Rugby League World Cup being cancelled and delayed a year, obviously England will be playing Samoa right now at St James's Park, as it was France, the home team at Perpignan, playing England. The scoreline would suggest it was a very comfortable, easy win for England, 30 points to 10. That is far from the case. Apart from the first 20 minutes, they didn't play very well. And to be fair, the French, had they turned up in the first 20 minutes, we might have had a different scoreline. Had some tries not been disallowed in the second half, England could have lost this game. And that is a fair assessment. 18 debutants, no NRL players available for selection. There's a whole host of other players not available through suspension and injury for both sides. The French team, all but one of their players is based in France, either for Toulouse or Catalan. Escarret is the only French player in this squad to play for Salford in the Super League. The rest of the squad all based at home in France, which you would think would help with combinations, would help with gelling the team together. But Toulouse do play in the Championship. Next season they're playing in the Super League. So if this international was next year, this could be a completely different story. One thing that was very noticeable: the first 20 minutes, the French just weren't there. They weren't ready. They weren't prepared. They weren't intense enough. They allowed the kick-off to go out after bouncing without touching it. Fatal error. They just absorbed wave of pressure, missed tackles, poor numbering up. So Farrell's try comes from just a missed tackle, a poor attempted tackle. Davis's try is just a winger holding his width and allowing the go forward in the middle, and poor reading in defence. The French wingers and the French centres were too narrow. That's narrow defence, and that comes down to limited time, I would think, in camp. Both sides only had a week to prepare for this one-off Test match. Obviously, they would have been at this point in the World Cup campaigns, and next year France and England are in the same group, which will be very interesting with Samoa and Greece. I think the French can take more from this game than the English as well. Toulouse will be playing at a higher level next season. Those Toulouse-based players in this squad will be playing and training at a higher level, playing at greater intensity, and that means that next year, this fixture in the World Cup could be a banana skin for England. It nearly was today. The Davis try, great finish as well. Obviously, he could have fended with his left hand, but he swaps the ball to his left hand to get the touchdown right in the corner. It's just holding his width. But yeah, the French wide channels were very poor defensively in the first 20 minutes. They were coming in too tight, poor numbering up. Makinson, very similar try on the other side. Again, holding his width. Lomax with a good pass. And again, the French centre, the French winger, they're too tight. They're too far in. They're not numbering up, making poor reads. And you've got an unmarked man on the wing. And the defence have created the overlap rather than the attack creating the overlap. So as a defensive coach, you'll be ripping your hair out. The Bateman try is that this is the type of rugby league I like, when it's broken play, open. There's no defensive structure, there's no attacking structure, and it literally is just running the ball. And Bateman, he can play at centre, ironically, and he probably could play at centre full time. Back row forward. Watched him a lot playing for Canberra in the NRL. Obviously, his time in Australia ended on a sour note. He's not had his best season back in the Super League. He made a few errors today. But at the same time, he took that try very, very well with just really good support play. That is the end of the England scoring. Only 2 out of the 4 conversions taken by Abdul, who had a decent debut, but didn't have the impact on the game that possibly he should have. So after 20 minutes, Escarret has a try disallowed for treading on the touchline, but that wakes the French up a little bit. England, they're playing by the scoreboard rather than what's in front of them. They allow their intensity to completely go. They're too comfortable. They're not putting France to the sword. And then for the next 15 minutes, it's the French are on top. And then we get the first flashpoint, in my opinion, in the game. First debating point. Reece Lynn, in my opinion, if we're going by the letter of the law, should have sat for 10 minutes and been put on report. I don't understand why they let more things go at international level. When, if we're talking about player welfare, and he is lucky that the player lands on his shoulder and not on his head, that he tackles. We're talking about player welfare, and we're talking about dangerous tackles, high shots, and trying to get these sort of tackles out of the game, which they pretty much eradicated the spear tackle. And this wasn't a true spear tackle. It was a bad technique from the tackler in how he's tackled a slightly smaller player. But if that is a Super League or NRL game, he's in the bin for 10 minutes. Possibly even sent off, depending on the severity of Is the player able to continue? Is there injury? Has there been foul play in the game leading up to this point, which there really hadn't, because there was no intensity in this game. I was looking forward to having a few fists fly and a bit of a biff, because you can still fight at international level, as far as I'm aware, in the rule book. But Reece Lynn is, I think, in my opinion, if we're going by the rule book, which in the second half the referees did, which disallowed, I think, two, in my mind, perfectly legitimate French tries, because unfortunately the refs see things in black and white too much rather than refereeing with common sense. If we're going by that, then he should be in the bin. England would have a player sent to the sin bin in the second half. However, they should have been down, in my opinion, to 12 men on 38 minutes. As it is, he stays on the field. Now, the French keep attacking. It ends up still 20-0 at half-time, but the French are in the game now. They've woken up. They've got their intensity levels up a bit. The Toulouse players are now up to speed with playing at that slightly more intense level. And in the second half, it's a different story. England have been meandering for 20 minutes before this. Lecam's try on 46 minutes is, well, very similar to Bateman's first try in the first half. Just great support play by a back row forward. And he's a big bloke. When I say he's a big bloke, his tackle on Johnny Lomax later on in the second half is perfect technique on how you can actually avoid decapitating the smaller man by just lining him up and hitting him in the chest, hit him in the sponsor. But his try on 46 minutes, I think this Lecam could definitely play in the NRL. I honestly believe the NRL is the better competition. Young up-and-coming player at Catalan. He's 6'9", just a shade on 6'10". He's built like a second row lock forward in rugby union, but he's far quicker and more mobile and more agile than a second row in rugby union. He can motor at some pace. He's very agile and very, for his size, he moves very, very well. Brilliant try. The Gigot try disallowed, technically by the letter of the law, that isn't a completed tackle, but England didn't deal with the kick through very well. It bubbles around, no one's taking control of it, and if he allows Walmsley to stand up and strips him, that's a try. That one, I think, in my mind, is correctly disallowed. The Carola try that's disallowed, Lecam holds his line. It's not as if he's changed his line to obstruct, and this is why I don't quite. This is what frustrates me with the obstruction. Lomax is not getting to that outside man, not even close, on the drift defence. It doesn't, obviously, ultimately, in my opinion, impact the defensive play because he's not getting there. He and his outside defender have already been beaten by the pass and the run, in my personal opinion. And if we need to referee with common sense. If Reece Lynn's tip tackle, which by the letter of the law is technically a sin bin at minimum, and going on report is just a penalty, for going seriously by being pedantic, then Carola's try should have stood, because that's brilliant attacking flair play by the French. They've numbered up very well. It's a dummy run. It's not as if he stopped dead in the line. He wants to carry on his run. Lomax just runs into him. He's on the drift defence. In my opinion, that's an unfairly disallowed try. And it's a great build-up play that goes unrewarded. And I think that also got the French up a bit more. Then we have the Lomax sin bin, which is actually the wrong player. It should be someone else going off, but it was a deserved sin bin in the sense that England have been giving away a consistent amount of penalties in that red zone, the 20-metre line backwards, for kick interference on the run-through, which, wrong player's gone off. But England at this point are on the back foot and they are defending a lot. However, down to 12 men, Makinson scores his second try. Again, just holding his width. Makinson is a very, very good player at holding his width and allowing the inside players to do a lot of work for him. I wouldn't say he's a lazy player. He's very good at reading and holding his width and waiting for more creative players to make space for him to finish. Holding his width, and it's a good support line. Deserved second try. I mean, he scores a try a game for England or Great Britain. He's got a very good strike rate at international level. He got 2 in this game, which is good to see. Sangale, what's Bateman doing in defence? Yes, you are a man down, so you're basically playing without a fullback in order to have a 12-man defensive line. There is no need for Bateman to rush out like that and try and go for an intercept. That is a brainless decision. But that's, again, coming from the fact that in the second half, England are on the back foot. And it's France with the better team in the second half. And imagine if those 2 tries had been allowed. It's a different game then. The momentum has swung a pendulum. He does get his second try later on. And again, with 12 men, in the last 10 minutes of the game, England played better because they're under pressure. It forced them to raise their game. But between minute 20 and minute 70, England were very, very poor. And this is a concerning thing going into playing Fiji before the World Cup next year and then going into the World Cup itself. It's something I've noticed about England in the last World Cup 4 years ago. Similar things would happen. The same thing happened against Tonga in that semi-final. Now, I know the teams are completely different from the last World Cup. A lot of player turnover. Players are retired, players are injured, players are unavailable. But looking at that 50 minutes, England were not good enough. And you could argue the amount of debutants and the lack of senior players contributed to the French getting back in the game, the French having more continuity with the fact they're only choosing from 3 clubs, England choosing, I think, from 7 or 8 teams, and the lack of leadership. If Bateman is your captain, he has to lead like a captain. And while he gets 2 tries, he didn't have the best game. He hasn't had the best season. Was he the right guy to be captain? Should Lomax have been captain? Much more consistent in the season. Could Makinson be captain? Again, much more consistent throughout the last couple of years. A lot of young players. Better temperament. Both Lomax and Makinson have a better temperament. Bateman gets a bit too emotional at times, and it's starting to flare up before the final whistle. There was, I wouldn't say nasty incidents. There was a couple of excessive hugging, I think is the best way to put it. I would rather, they still had a bit of a biff towards the end of the game, to be honest. I'm one of those fans who likes a bit of a punch-up when it comes to rugby league, and I do sort of miss it at the club level. I know other fans are going, we must clean up the game, and obviously the rule makers are going, we want to encourage people to watch the game. Fans watch the game because they beat the shit out of each other. Can we have that back, please? Just saying, it would add something to this game. We had an early flare-up after just a couple of minutes for a high tackle. Can we just bring back a bit of anger? Because I do think we're trying to over-sanitise things. Yes, I know concussion and injury and player welfare are important. I think the players know they're going to get concussions. It's being looked after when they get concussed. Just allow the biff to happen. Allow the punch-up to happen. It adds intensity to the game. Fans love it. We love it. It is kind of part and parcel of the culture and the history of the game. But when Bateman's celebration for his second try, I think his celebration has a bit of anger in there, a bit of intensity. He is that. He plays on the edge. I think that spills over into the last 2 minutes of play where there's a bit of aggressive hugging, I think is the best way to put it. I mean, if there wasn't really much in the match in that kind of needle, which when it comes to England and France, it doesn't matter if it's football, rugby union, rugby league, there's always been that needle, and it lacked it a bit today. I think that's, again, debutants, 2 young teams. I think France can take more out of this game than England. I think Sean Wayne will be quite frustrated with the performance. First 20 minutes, he'd be really happy. But when he's, assessing the video footage and talking to his assistants, over the next 12 months, there's a lot to work on. He will have the NRL players back next year. And next year's World Cup is a big advertisement for both France and England, where they're better players like Lecam, like Makinson, who I do think, in my mind, could be an NRL player. To put their hands up and say to the NRL, because the Dolphins are coming in as an expansion team, give us a contract. Let's play overseas. Because I do believe that, there are some talented players in the Super League, and I do believe, the NRL is the better competition for quality. I think this game also proved that, the NRL, without those NRL players on display, there wasn't that intensity in the game. And, it was a bit of a flat contest. And you do get that with standalone games where you have a limited preparation time and a lot of debutants and a lot of players unavailable. But we'll see what happens. 12 months' time, the World Cup, fingers crossed, should go ahead as planned. And both these teams will face each other in the group stage. I do believe this game the French can take more out of it, especially their second half performance. And of course, spending more time together in camp, different story. Plus, the England side will get the NRL talent back. So we'll obviously see what happens in 12 months. But thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.